Hello everyone, I'm Hesun from Caltech. Today I'm going to share our recent work on deep probabilistic imaging, a new algorithm that learns a deep generative model to quantify uncertainty and characterize multiple feasible solutions in computational image reconstruction. This is a joint work with Professor Katie Bauman. In computational imaging problems, for example, MRI, the signal we want to observe cannot be directly measured. So in these cases, we need to first collect a bunch of data from a sensing system, and then solve an inverse problem to recover the hidden signal from the data. Currently, computational imaging has been widely applied in many fields. Another example is the very long baseline interferometric imaging, which was used by the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration in 2019 to capture the first image of a black hole. Here, the high-resolution astronomical image is recovered from the measurements from radio telescopes distributed across the globe. Typically, in computational imaging, in order to extract hidden signals from the noisy and incomplete measurements, we use the maximum a posteriori estimation, or so-called map estimation method, to solve the inverse problem. In map estimation, we maximize the posterior likelihood of an image, x, conditioned on the measurement y to compute the most probable hidden image. According to the Bayes rule, the image posterior can be distributed as a summation of the data likelihood and the image prior. Therefore, the map estimation reconstructed image not only fits the data well, but also satisfies the image properties defined by our prior knowledge. However, the map estimation only produces the best point estimate without any measure of uncertainty. In practice, there are often many different images that still fit the data very well that we do not see when we simply do map estimation. For example, when the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration was trying to take the first black hole image, scientists find that many images could fit the radio interferometry data. Although they all clearly reveal the ring structure, it seems like there are uncertainty about the flux distribution of the rings. So to deliver reliable science, it is important in computational imaging to quantify and understand uncertainty of a reconstructed image. But this is not simple. It took astronomers from the Event Horizon Telescope several months to investigate all possible reconstructions and compute the reconstruction mean and standard deviation of the first black hole picture. In this talk, I will introduce you a newly developed deep learning approach that can achieve efficient uncertainty quantification. In this method, we are trying to learn a deep generative model to generate posterior samples of an imaging inverse problem. Instead of recovering a single image from the measurement data, here we aim to recover the full posterior distribution of the imaging inverse problem. Traditionally, this could be achieved using sampling method, such as Markov chain Monte Carlo or so-called MCMC method. However, these sampling rejection approaches can be prohibitively slow and computationally expensive for high-dimensional inverse problems. Instead, training a deep generative neural network is an optimization-based method, which is much faster. Let's revisit the deep generative model first. In the past years, we've witnessed the great success of deep generative model in computer vision. For instance, given enough training images, we can train a neural network that takes a variable noise z as its input and output a picture x that looks like a real bedroom image at the first glance. By plugging in different noise, you will get different output pictures. So this learned generative neural network defines a very flexible and expressive implicit distribution over the space of training images, and it can capture complex correlations among image pixels. Inspired by this recent progress on deep generative model, we developed deep probabilistic imaging, or DPI, a method that samples from a posterior distribution using a learned generative neural network. The basic idea of DPI is to optimize the weights, theta, of a neural network so that if you feed different input noise to the neural network, the output of the neural network will be an image which is equivalent to a sample from the image reconstruction posterior px given y. In other words, we want to learn a generative neural network that can map a distribution of noise to an imaging posterior distribution. Okay, now the question becomes, how could we train this network? Unlike in the case of training a generator of bedroom pictures, here we don't have a training set of posterior images we can use. If we had the posterior image samples, there are no need to learn this neural network, right? The only data we have for optimizing the neural network is the sparse and noisy measurement data of a single hidden image. So, in DPI, instead of using a collection of training images to solve for the neural network, as is typically done in other computer vision problems, here we define the loss function as the KL divergence between the distribution learned by the generative model and the true image posterior, so the similarity between these two distributions can be maximized. This makes DPI a special type of variational inference method. In variational inference, we define a simple family of density functions, for example, Q theta here visualized by the blue space, and then we solve an optimization problem to find the parameters theta star that best match the target posterior distribution px given y. Traditionally, this family of variational distributions were pretty simple, such as Gaussian distributions, so that a sample's probability can be easily calculated. However, in DPI, we define a very flexible family of distributions using a deep generative model, so we can better capture the complicated image posterior via interesting targeting. This gives us flexibility that we didn't have before with the simple variational models, which allows us to get much closer to faithfully approximating samples from a well-defined image posterior. Actually, the DPI optimization problem can be also intuitively derived by naturally extending the map estimation method. Since we want to use our neural network to generate many good reconstructed images, here we can optimize the expectation of the map estimation loss of multiple image samples from our generative model. More specifically, we will optimize the neural network weights, theta, so that every time we sample a new image, x, from this network, the posterior likelihood of that sample is high conditioned on the observed measurements y. Simply rewriting this use-based rule, we once again see how we can split the posterior likelihood into a data fitting loss and an image prior loss. By solving this optimization problem, every generative sample from the network will both fit the measurement data and the image prior distribution well. However, that is still not enough for optimizing the DPI generative model. Simply fitting the neural network to a conditional log likelihood is not going to produce an image posterior distribution. Instead, it will make the generative model collapse to a single image. To avoid mode collapse, we need to include an extra entropy term to encourage the diversity of the generative samples from the neural network. The intuitive loss turns out to be exactly the same as the KL divergence between the generative model distribution and the image posterior. We now have shown that, in addition to understanding DPI as a variational inference method, it can also be regarded as a natural extension to map estimation. So it should be a general uncertainty quantification framework for all imaging inverse problems. One last thing worth noticing here is that, in order to optimize this loss function, we need our generative model to be efficient in both generating samples and evaluating the likelihood of an arbitrary image. However, normal generative models, such as GANs, are only good at generating samples but cannot evaluate the sample's likelihood to compute the entropy loss. In order to accomplish both goals, in DPI, we use a particular type of invertible generative model called normalizing flow. This type of network can be executed in both directions. As a result, we can easily generate samples from noise using the forward pass and easily compute the entropy loss using the inverse pass. We've tested DPI in multiple cases, but due to time limit, I like to only briefly show a couple examples I find super instructive. Here are the DPI results on simple toy examples of 2D data. In this experiment, we are assuming that our images are only two-dimensional, with the corresponding two pixels x1 and x2. And we are trying to use DPI to capture two-dimensional posterior distributions and the different measurement data. Here we are showing the true posterior distribution of x1 and x2. Three test examples for this experiment are the Gaussian mixture model, the double crescent model, and the sinusoidal model. Using DPI, we obtained generative models that allow us to sample from the distributions shown below. As you can see, although the distributions learned by DPI are not perfect, they match most of the main features of the true posterior distributions. DPI doesn't miss any modes, and it also performs robust for some unusual distributions, such as the sinusoidal model. We also tested DPI on more realistic synthetic black hole data. In this case, the realistic noise faced by Event Horizon Telescope, including the atmospheric turbulence and the instrumentation calibration errors, are included in simulating the data. On the top is the ground truth black hole image. Using this mock dataset, we run our typical map estimation, and we noticed that every time we run the method with slightly different initialization, we would recover different results. In some images, the bright spot was on the bottom left, as marked by the red boxes, and in some other cases, the bright spots were the top right, as marked by the green boxes. It appeared that both modes fit the data pretty well. That indicates that our imaging problem is likely to have a posterior with two modes. Actually, this is pretty common for radiointerferometric imaging, because the interferometric imaging problem is a non-convex optimization problem that often has multiple solutions. We then tested our DPI algorithm on this dataset, and here are the samples from the learned neural network. You can see that our learned neural network was able to capture a posterior distribution that also indicates there are two modes in our data. By embedding our images in a 2D space using t-SNE plot, we see more clearly that the sampled images are clustered into two modes. The mean and the standard deviation of each mode are shown to the right. From the t-SNE embedding, you can also see our truth image, denoted as a right triangle here, also lies in one of the clusters. The distribution of data fitting loss for images in each mode are also shown to the left in the current slide. Although it can be difficult to tell which image is correct by inspecting the data fitting loss of a single image, by analyzing the histogram of data fitting loss for each mode, it becomes clearer which mode is more likely to correspond to the true image. For example, in this case, mode 2 is the correct mode that has a smaller data fitting loss. More excitingly, we also run DPI on several real data. This is the result we got when we run the approach on the real M87 black hole data from Event Horizon Telescope. It is really encouraging that if you compare the standard deviation in the DPI images to the standard deviation we had published in the original M87 imaging paper, you can see that they are amazingly similar. In both uncertainty maps, there are three regions with highest uncertainty that seem to match up. It only takes DPI around 1 hour to train on a single GPU, which is much more efficient than the ad hoc uncertainty quantification techniques used by EHC originally, which takes scientists several months to fully explain the reconstruction results. So we believe DPI is a reliable tool. We are actually working on quantifying the uncertainty of several recent astronomical imaging results using DPI. Beyond astronomy, we also applied DPI to compress the sensing MRI data with different acquisition times. Here, we show the uncertainty quantification results of a reconstructed knee image using around 1/3 time of a full MRI scan. The profile of DPI standard deviation estimation perfectly captures the pattern of the absolute reconstruction error in this case. And it also performs robust in other cases with even shorter acquisition times. In summary, in this talk, we present deep probabilistic imaging, an unsupervised approach that learns a normalizing flow generative model to approximate image posterior distribution in computational imaging. This method is able to capture multimodal solutions and quantify the uncertainty of the reconstructed image. We've demonstrated this method on both radio interferometric imaging and compressed sensing MRI problem. We believe that this framework is a general framework for efficient uncertainty quantification that is applicable to other imaging and parameter estimation problems. Our code has been published online. Feel free to check our project website for more information. Thanks.